Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. We have our entire team standing by as we bring you breaking news right at the top of this edition, and that is that Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has been fired by President Donald Trump. Sources told NBC News that Trump told lawmakers that he was unhappy with her testimony this week before House and Senate committees. Now, Trump announced her firing and said he is replacing her with Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin, a Republican. Trump thanked Noem for her service, stating the former South Dakota senator, quote, has served us well. Noem is being reassigned as the Special Envoy for the Shield of Americas, a new security initiative in the Western Hemisphere, the president said. Now, during testimony before Congress this week, Noem defended the actions of her agency during immigration crackdowns in Democratic states and cities. After the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy by federal agents, she called them domestic terrorists. Some Republican lawmakers called her leadership a disaster. Another Republican pushed her to explain why her department spent more than $200 million for an ad campaign encouraging migrants to leave the country. Now, during her year in office, Noem visited the U.S.-Mexico border numerous times, including all three regions where our correspondents are based. So all three correspondents joining us here today, and we're going to start with the reaction that Noem received in California on the West Coast when she visited the Otay Mesa border crossing earlier this year. Joining me now, San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera to talk more about that.
Rudy Noem was out here 3 weeks ago, exactly 3 weeks ago. And as you mentioned, she was at the Otay Mesa port of entry on the commercial side. She stood in a warehouse surrounded by boxes that were labeled evidence, reportedly filled with drugs. She touted President Trump's efforts in curbing illegal immigration into the United States, but she was also honoring or really saying that President Trump had done a fantastic job as far as stopping illegal drugs from entering the United States. She said the flow of fentanyl from south of the border into the U.S. was down by 56%. She also said that 118,000 pounds of narcotics had been seized at the border, something that was unheard of. According to her. Now, she also talked about how illegal immigration is way down under President Trump, citing that last year there were only 238,000 illegal crossings apprehensions in the U.S., when in 2024 there were 1.5 million. In 2023, there were 2 million, according to Secretary Noem. There you see her as she had this news conference 3 weeks ago at the Otay Mesa port of entry. While she was here, and at the time she was doing the news conference, outside the walls of the port of entry, there were dozens and dozens of demonstrators using bullhorns, sirens, and music to drown her out. And at the time when she was speaking, they did make it hard for her message to come across. So in that regard, they were successful in trying to keep her from saying a lot of stuff. Obviously, her visit to San Diego was not very popular. Now here, in recent weeks, the city of San Diego has announced a lawsuit against her and the Department of Homeland Security for installing razor wire on San Diego City property without consent from the city. The County of San Diego is also suing Noem and DHS, ICE, CoreCivic, the people who run the Otay Mesa Detention Center, for not allowing county health inspectors to enter the facility. So that's another lawsuit against her. Now, some reaction from local migrant advocates has been coming in. I've been calling a few people. One said that he was very happy to see her go, but he is worried about her replacement, U.S. Senator from Oklahoma, Markwayne Mullin. He is afraid that he's going to be just as bad as Noem. Again, his words, not mine. Another person told me Noem is a woman responsible for a lot of pain and suffering, and they hope that she is tried for her misappropriation of funds and criminal behavior. Another person told me Noem is a woman of low self-esteem who used the plight of migrants to promote herself and make herself feel better. saying, "Ding dong, the wicked witch is gone." Again, that is a quote from some migrant advocate here in town. Now, Rudy, I'm sure that there are a lot of people who approved of her performance and are likely sorry to see her go. Someone else told me that she is basically a sacrificial lamb, as there are attempts by the White House to end this partial government shutdown.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned the reaction from migrant advocates. Two of the three, I believe, that you spoke to mentioned something about the amount of money she spent, as well as something along the lines of boosting her self-esteem. Something you and I actually talked about on a prior edition of Border Report Live was the $200 million ad campaign, which, interestingly enough, was one of the questions she got from Senator Kennedy of Louisiana this week during her testimony in front of Congress.
And you wonder what's going to happen to all those ads. They can't run them anymore. Whenever you walk through a port of entry or an airport, you would see her talking about their efforts to curb illegal immigration, hailing their successes, stopping people from illegally entering the U.S. So you wonder what's going to happen to all those ads. And of course, by now, we're assuming it's a total loss because that's money that has been wasted. As some people would say, ads that we're never going to see anymore on TV. So it's a shame, but it's part of what happens in Washington, or what's been happening in Washington these days.
Yeah. Well, stand by if you could, Salvador. We're going to bring you in again a little bit later to as we kind of continue our discussion. But as we make our trip across the border to the different places that Border Report Live covers with our correspondents, one of the places she stopped, and it was one of her biggest and really first appearances as Homeland Security Secretary, was in the El Paso, New Mexico area, where she is known for doing something that was kind of laughed at a little bit by a lot of folks. But in what she says was crucial to border security, and that was painting parts of border bollards black. Our El Paso correspondent Julian Resendiz joins us now to talk more about that visit. Julian, she had been there a couple times. We also know about the detention center that's been built up over in your neck of the woods. Tell us a little bit about when Secretary Noem came by El Paso, New Mexico.
Yeah, Rudy. She was here late last year, and what you're referring to, the action that caught attention over here in El Paso, is that she went across the state line into New Mexico, and she hand-painted some of the steel bollards on the border wall black. And the intent of painting them black was to make them hotter, and so that smugglers would burn their hands, and so that it became more difficult for migrants to go up or come down the wall. It was mostly symbolic. We have since tried to approach the area, but because it has been designated as a national defense area, we're not really allowed to go. However, I was able to send my Juarez, Mexico crew out there, and what they tell me is that the bollards, the wall was never really fully painted black beyond the space, the area that Noem hand-painted herself when she was here. So it was mostly a symbolic gesture. Now, from the handful of people that I've been able to talk to since her reassignment, if they pretty much echo what Sal just said, pretty much saying, well, good riddance, she should be investigated, etc. But the underlying question is, is anything going to change with her replacement? What the activism community here and in other places is concerned about is the tactics, the policies. Are those going to change with the new DHS interim leader, or are we just shuffling faces around and continuing to do what the Trump administration has set out to do, which has been heavily criticized on the one hand by pro-immigrant advocates. But on the other hand, I got to tell you that when she was here, I heard a lot of praise from local federal workers. We're talking about border agents, border officers. They were happy that the top leadership was here in El Paso, regardless of whatever she came specifically to do, but just recognizing the job and the labor that they do here on the border, which is pretty much keep watch for narcotics and immigrant smugglers. So that's the way things are in this part of the border.
Now, we're going to talk more, if we have time, a little bit later in this edition about what's going on with Camp Montana out at Fort Bliss, the kind of pop-up detention facility that in just about 7 months of being open has seen some injuries and even some deaths, and now fatalities, and now potentially even an outbreak of contagious disease. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but I think the biggest recent story out of the El Paso area is what happened with the alleged cartel drone being shot down, or a cartel drone incursion that stopped all air travel in El Paso for quite some time. Is there any thought? Were there any thoughts from any of the advocates or anybody on the ground there in El Paso about maybe a lot of the what some are calling confusion or chaos, and when it comes to interagency operations?
Well, Rudy, it has been widely reported, including by us, how there was some very blatant miscommunication between government agencies. And according to a national news report, maybe some interagency jealousy, so to speak, of the right hand not telling the left hand what it's doing, and the left hand, hitting the panic button and shutting down air traffic for the next 10 days. The situation was cleared out within hours, but this, according to one former official that I spoke to, and we reported the story, he called it a classic example of how not to communicate something to another agency. So that too was a pending issue between DHS and the Department of Homeland Security, and that also weighs in on leadership, and that's also one of the things that they're talking about.
All right. Thank you so much, Julian. Yeah, stand by as well as we kind of continue this discussion. We're going to bring you, Salvador, in just a moment. You at home, stay with us. We're going to bring in our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez, to talk about the Secretary, or former Secretary Noem's latest visit down here to the Rio Grande Valley, where she introduced the incoming buoy barriers in the Rio Grande. So stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. We are talking about the big developing breaking news. Kristi Noem fired by the president. She is out as the Department of Homeland Security Secretary. We started this edition on the West Coast with our Salvador Rivera in San Diego, made our way down to New Mexico and El Paso with our Julian Resendiz. Now it is time to bring in our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez, to talk about Noem's latest visit. Was it in November, December that she was here?
January 7th.
It was January, okay.
Just
It's been a long year already.
It has been, Rudy. Right, Kristi Noem visited January 7th to Brownsville to introduce the first of these border buoys that the federal government is putting in. As you know, Texas has put in its own border buoys, but she announced 500 miles of these 15-foot-long buoy structures going in the Rio Grande. The first 17 miles being put in here in Brownsville in Cameron County, and there you see some video of her. Before the announcement of the buoys, or the showing of the buoys to the media, she sat down and had a roundtable with ranchers. She wanted to know what was going on here in the border. She spent a good couple hours with them. There you see these giant buoys, which are different from what Texas put in, with the little steel barriers in the middle that have been greatly criticized by Texas's Operation Lone Star. The federal government's, they say, will float much better. They're just going in, and they're in an area that you cannot access unless you are actually taken there. Just last week, there were protests held in Brownsville by environmentalists who are opposed to this. They're saying it's going to change the course of the Rio Grande. It's going to cause sediment to build up. The leader of the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe told me that the river is sacred to them. Any rituals have occurred there, and that this is not going to allow the free flow of wildlife, and it's going to dishonor the river system. She said it was necessary to stop drugs from coming in and to keep the border safe, but as we've already discussed, as Julian and Sal have mentioned, we've had the lowest border crossings in history recorded, although the Rio Grande Valley sector has, for the past couple of months, led with the most. The numbers are incredibly low compared to during the Biden administration, but we still are seeing about 1,400, I guess, people a month crossing here. And so, the reaction to Noem's departure is interesting. I know that we have heard a lot of criticism, but I got a comment from Congresswoman Monica de la Cruz, who is a Republican. She represents Texas's congressional 15th district, which starts here in Hidalgo County, goes up to San Antonio. And she actually praised Noem. She said, quote, alongside President Trump, Secretary Noem helped deliver the most secure border in history. I look forward to learning about her new position as Special Envoy for the Shield of the Americans. I congratulate my good friend, Senator Mark Wayne Mullen. I am confident that he will continue to keep our border secure and protect our national security. On the flip side, Democratic Congressman Vicente Gonzalez, who represents Congressional District 34, which includes Cameron County, where those border buoys are going in Brownsville, has never been liked Noem. He's long criticized her, and it's no surprise that he said Kristi Noem's incompetency and lack of accountability emboldened rogue immigration operations in South Texas and across the country that have created chaos and left Americans, citizens dead. She had no business running a federal agency. Frankly, her firing should have happened much sooner. We've also reached out to Congressman Henry Cuellar. He's ranking member of the House Homeland Security Appropriations Committee. As Sal and Julian mentioned, this partial shutdown by the Department of Homeland Security is on his Appropriations Committee. They are trying to come to an agreement on spending. But, I know that many of the Democrats are upset about the $175 billion that was passed in the big, beautiful bill for border security last year. That was signed by the president on July 4th, as we've talked about before. That money is not touchable. So they can't go back on that money. And there's a lot of repercussions happening with that. And a lot of people want more regulations put on ICE agents because $74 billion of that money went towards ICE. And they want communities to be so safer. They want agents to not wear masks. And they are saying there needs to be reforms before we agree on this funding.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring all of our correspondents back in now. If we had more time, I mean, we'd love to talk about a whole range of different topics here, but one I did want to touch on is the environmental aspect. All of us on this program, we've heard from environmentalists in groups in our regions. Sal, starting with you, is anybody kind of talking about any new concerns they may have, or are they kind of breathing a relief a little bit when it comes to any environmental concerns out on your end of the area?
This morning, since the announcement was made, I have not spoken with any environmentalists or people who might have concerns of what's been going on in terms of building border structures, as we know, and this has happened throughout the southern border. They have done away with a lot of environmental laws. They simply bypass them, thrown away, disregard them for the sake of building this wall at a much faster pace. I would assume environmentalists are probably kind of wondering what's going to happen because they don't know much about her replacement, this Mark Wayne Mullen, who's actually a former mixed martial arts fighter. So we don't know much about him or what his policies might be, but we all know that he's basically going to follow whatever Mr. Trump wants to do. So I'm assuming this will continue. The destruction of the environment for the sake of building the border wall will go on, as we have seen for the last year or so.
And I know Julian.
Rudy,
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Rudy. Yeah, I can tell you that just earlier this week, I reported on a meeting of the Alpine, Texas City Council meeting in which they unanimously voted to send a letter to President Trump, to the DHS Secretary, and other federal officials regarding concerns at a new project that would put between 100 and 110 miles of new border wall in the Big Bend region of Texas. As you may know, Big Bend is huge as far as a tourism attraction in the western part of the state. It's got beautiful views, according to residents. It's got a lot of wildlife, and then the residents of these communities in the Big Bend area have learned of this project to put 30-foot steel bollard walls where wildlife goes back and forth, and also where visitors used to have unimpeded views of nature. And now they're concerned that they're going to be looking at impeded views of nature with those 30-foot bollards. So this resolution is going to reach the White House. It's going to reach a whole lot of federal officials. And it's expressing concern, obviously, at what's going to happen with the environment with this continued push to build border wall. Now, federal officials say, okay, it's not set in stone. We're going to listen. We're probably going to do it, but we're going to listen to the residents. And we're not going to put the border wall all over the Big Bend. There's some areas that are not going to have wall at all. And obviously, they say that will have to do with wildlife and other considerations. There's also a lot of canyons and mountain structures right next to the border. Obviously, it'd be impossible to put the border wall out there. But there are environmental concerns. And going back to what I said earlier, regardless of whether it's Noem or somebody else, what the environmental community wants is a change in policies, not to be so aggressive, and above all, take local communities' points of view into account before you go ahead and do something.
Well, and just to dovetail on that, I think what the environmentalists want is for the federal government to follow federal laws, the National Environmental Protection Act, which Noem waived like 42 NEPA laws, clean air, clean water, all sorts of laws that have been in place for a reason in order to put up these structures. And just to go back on a little bit about what Julian said, a couple years ago we did a border tour, and I did a whitewater rafting in Big Bend through Terlingua. At the time, the Trump administration said they were not going to build wall there because of the terrain, the topography, the river twists and turns, and there's no way to put such structures up. So it's interesting that they suddenly went back on this. And, how are they actually going to do this in the Big Bend? It's been a big question, huge concern. Many environmental groups are just, up in arms over this, as well as the communities there. I did forget to tell you, Rudy, a few minutes ago during Noem's last visit, she was actually asked, so do you like your job? And she said, I asked the president for this job because I think it's the hardest job on his cabinet and I want to do it. So it's very interesting that today the president announced that she will no longer be doing it.
All right. Well,
Sandra, I wanted to make a comment on one of your observations, and that is that you said that Noem waived XYZ environmental laws. But let me tell you, could she have waived them without the consent or the knowledge of her boss? And we go back to the core of the issue. The face doesn't matter. It's the policies that count, according to activists and environmentalists and all of them.
Yeah, of course she's doing.
I would like to just add, and not to pound on Secretary Noem, but what were her qualifications for this job? She was the governor of a state of South Dakota with a population that's half the size of the city of Tijuana. So what made President Trump think that she knew the border, knew border policies, knew the way things work out here? And she still made her the head of Department of Homeland Security, immigration enforcement. So I'm guessing it falls back on him because he obviously hired the wrong person for the job. Now, getting to the environmental side, they've also discussed what happens to wildlife, ocelots, jaguars who can't go back across the border. But another important point that was made recently by environmentalists in Arizona, they were saying that this is impeding the flow of bees back and forth across the border. So this is going to affect the pollination process for farms and groves all over Arizona and other states along the southern border. And it could actually lead to the killing off of many bees. And without bees, the human race cannot survive. So just throwing that out there, this is something they said recently, another reason to be concerned about the waiver of all these environmental laws for the sake of building the border barriers.
And just to dovetail on that, Sal, as governor of South Dakota, when she was governor, she actually visited Eagle Pass several times where they were putting in these border buoys by the state of Texas. And she was extremely supportive of Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott. And I believe that's where she kind of caught the administration's eye.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera, El Paso correspondent Julian Resendiz, and our South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez joining us today to break down this breaking news that the president has fired Kristi Noem. She is out at the Department of Homeland Security. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen will be replacing her of Oklahoma. So lots to see. We'll see what happens next when it comes to the Department of Homeland Security. Stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. If you missed this edition, don't forget you can always catch up on all of our episodes in podcast form. You can catch Border Report Live on any of the apps there at the bottom of your screen. For Salvador Rivera in San Diego, Julian Resendiz in El Paso, and Sandra Sanchez right here in South Texas, my name is Rudy Mireles. We'll see you all next time.